The saddest graves are not the ones that hold the dead, they are the ones that hold the parts of ourselves we never let live again. Rain fell in silver sheets beneath a moon hidden behind thick clouds, turning the northern field into a sea of shimmering grass. Every blade glowed faintly beneath the storm, reflecting pale light across the soaked earth. 10 years ago, a young girl knelt alone in the middle of that field. She was barely 14. Her hands trembled as she dug through the wet soil with a small iron shovel she had stolen from an abandoned shed hours earlier. Cold mud covered her sleeves. Rain dripped from her blonde hair. The storm showed no mercy, but neither did the memories chasing her. Evelyn Carter kept digging. The hole did not need to be large. What she planned to bury was small enough to fit inside both hands. Yet every inch of earth felt heavier than the last. Every movement felt like saying goodbye to something she could never replace. Thunder rolled across the distant mountains. The sound echoed through the valley like a warning. Evelyn ignored it. Her blue eyes remained fixed on the growing hole before her. She had traveled nearly 3 miles through the storm to reach this place. The field of silver grass was ancient, sacred, forgotten by most of the kingdom. Elders claimed the soil carried traces of old lunar magic. Wolves avoided it. Hunters respected it. Children whispered stories about it around fireplaces during winter. Tonight, none of those stories mattered. Tonight, Evelyn had come here for one reason. Her fingers slowly opened. 2 silver-white fangs rested in her palm. Rain washed across them, causing them to gleam beneath the storm-dark sky. They were beautiful, sharp, powerful, a symbol of everything she had once been. A symbol of everything she no longer wanted to be. For several seconds, she simply stared at them. The storm seemed quieter. The world smaller. Her throat tightened painfully. She remembered running through forests beneath moonlight. She remembered feeling strong, free, fearless. She remembered believing that strength could protect the people she loved. Life had taught her otherwise. The lessons had arrived too young and cut too deep. Ever since then, every glance in a mirror had become a reminder of mistakes she wished she could erase. The fangs represented power. They represented identity. They represented a version of herself she could no longer bear to face. Another flash of lightning illuminated the field. Evelyn lowered the fangs into the hole. Her breathing became uneven. Tears mixed with rainwater across her cheeks. She quickly wiped them away. No one was there to see her cry, but she hated crying anyway. It felt too much like surrender. Yet tonight felt like surrender no matter how she tried to describe it. She reached into her coat pocket and removed a folded piece of paper. The page was damp around the edges. Written across it in careful handwriting was a promise. A vow. A final decision. She unfolded it and read the words one last time. Then she placed the paper beside the fangs. The wind immediately tried to snatch it away. Evelyn pressed it gently into the soil. "I am done," she whispered into the storm. Her voice sounded impossibly small. "I am done being that person." The rain answered with steady rhythm against the grass. Evelyn began covering the hole. One handful of earth at a time. Soil fell over silver. Mud covered memory. Grass swallowed evidence. Slowly the hole disappeared. When she finished, no one would ever know what rested beneath the ground. No one would know what she had buried. No one would know what she had abandoned. She sat back on her heels and stared at the patch of earth. It looked ordinary, unremarkable, like every other piece of land in the field. Somehow that hurt most of all. 10 minutes later she stood. Her knees ached. Her hands were filthy. Her heart felt hollow. The storm continued raging overhead. Evelyn looked down one final time. "Stay buried," she whispered. Then she turned away. The walk home felt longer than the journey there. Every step carried her farther from the girl she used to be. Farther from the strength she no longer trusted. Farther from the future she once imagined. By the time the lights of the distant village appeared through the rain, she had made herself a promise. She would never return. She would never dig up what she buried. She would never become that person again. The field remained behind her, silent beneath the storm. Hidden beneath the silver soil, 2 forgotten fangs waited in darkness. And somewhere beyond the mountains, years before he would ever learn her name, a future Alpha King slept beneath the same moon, completely unaware that one day he would stand in that field and uncover everything she had tried to leave behind. 10 years later, very few people in the Northern Territory remembered the girl who had crossed a storm to bury part of herself beneath silver soil. That was exactly how Evelyn Carter preferred it. Dawn painted the valley in soft gold as she stepped from her small cottage carrying a basket of bread balanced against her hip. The air smelled of pine trees and distant rain. Smoke drifted lazily from chimneys throughout the village. It was a peaceful morning, ordinary in every possible way, and Evelyn had spent years carefully building a life filled with ordinary things. She greeted neighbors, fed stray animals that appeared outside her door, delivered bread to elderly residents who struggled during winter. Then she returned home before anyone could ask too many questions. Most people liked Evelyn. Very few truly knew her. Children waved when she passed. Shopkeepers smiled when she entered their stores. Yet conversations about her always seemed strangely incomplete. If someone asked where she came from, answers became vague. If someone asked why she lived alone, shoulders lifted in uncertainty. If someone asked whether she belonged to a pack, silence usually followed. Evelyn had become a woman people appreciated without understanding. Invisible in the gentlest way possible. She preferred it that way. The less attention she received, the easier it became to keep old promises buried. The morning passed quietly. By noon she was helping repair a fence behind the village schoolhouse. By afternoon she was organizing supplies inside the community pantry. Her life moved through familiar routines. Predictable. Safe. Yet sometimes, during rare moments when nobody was watching, her gaze drifted toward the distant northern hills. Toward a place hidden beyond forests and streams. Toward a field she had promised never to visit again. The thought appeared less often than it once had. But it never disappeared completely. Some promises became ghosts. They followed people for years. Late that afternoon, a group of young wolves gathered near the training grounds. Their excited voices carried across the village square. Evelyn glanced over while carrying a crate of vegetables. Several teenagers practiced pack exercises under the supervision of experienced instructors. Their movements were confident, powerful, natural. She looked away almost immediately. Nobody noticed. Nobody except an elderly woman arranging flowers beside a nearby stall. The woman watched Evelyn for a moment before speaking softly. "You still avoid looking at them." Evelyn offered a small smile. "Good afternoon to you too, Martha." Martha chuckled. That was not an answer. Evelyn adjusted the crate in her arms. Not every question needs one. The older woman studied her carefully. You know, hiding and healing are not always the same thing. Evelyn's smile faded slightly. Martha had known her for years. She was one of the few people who occasionally came close to seeing beneath the surface. Fortunately, she was also kind enough not to push too hard. "I should finish these deliveries," Evelyn said. Martha nodded. "Of course." Then she added quietly, "Just remember that surviving something is not the same as living afterward." The words followed Evelyn long after she walked away. That evening she sat alone on the small porch outside her cottage. Sunset painted the mountains in shades of amber and gold. Crickets chirped softly in nearby grass. Everything should have felt peaceful. Instead, a strange restlessness lingered beneath her ribs. She could not explain it. The feeling had been growing for several days. As if something distant had begun moving closer. As if the world itself was holding its breath. The sound of approaching horses interrupted her thoughts. Evelyn looked toward the main road. Riders entered the village beneath banners she immediately recognized. Black banners embroidered with silver wolves. Royal banners. Conversations stopped throughout the square. Doors opened. Villagers gathered along the road. Excitement spread quickly. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Royal visitors rarely traveled this far north without reason. The lead rider removed his hood. Murmurs immediately swept through the crowd. Even from a distance, she recognized him. Everyone did. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, wearing a black coat marked with silver embroidery. King Nathaniel Ashford, the Alpha King himself. Villagers bowed respectfully. Children stared with wide eyes. Advisors and guards followed behind him in orderly formation. Nathaniel acknowledged the crowd with calm confidence before dismounting near the village center. His attention moved across the gathering. Briefly, casually. Then his gaze stopped. Directly on Evelyn. For a single second, neither moved. She stood on her porch holding a cup of tea. He stood beside his horse, surrounded by advisors. Complete strangers. Yet something about the moment felt strangely important. Then the feeling vanished. Nathaniel turned toward the village elder and resumed conversation. The crowd relaxed. Life continued. But as twilight settled across the valley, Evelyn found herself watching the royal banners flutter in the wind and wondering why, after 10 quiet years, fate suddenly seemed interested in finding her again. Evelyn spent the next morning convincing herself that the arrival of the Alpha King had nothing to do with her. The argument sounded reasonable while she kneaded bread dough inside the village bakery. It sounded less convincing every time she glanced through the window and spotted royal guards moving through the streets. By midday, the entire village buzzed with excitement. Children followed the guards from a respectful distance. Merchants polished storefronts that had not been cleaned so thoroughly in years. Even Martha seemed unusually interested in whatever business had brought the king north. Evelyn focused on her work. Flour dusted her sleeves. Warm sunlight streamed through the bakery windows. The familiar routine should have been comforting. Instead, an uncomfortable feeling lingered beneath her calm exterior. She had spent 10 years learning how to avoid attention. Yet somehow attention had arrived anyway. The bakery door opened. Several customers entered. Evelyn greeted them politely and returned to arranging fresh loaves on wooden shelves. A few minutes later, the room fell strangely quiet. She looked up. 2 royal advisors had entered the bakery. Their dark coats carried silver wolf emblems identical to those displayed on the banners outside. Conversations immediately lowered to whispers. The advisors purchased bread, thanked the owner, and left without incident. Yet before stepping outside, one of them glanced directly toward Evelyn. The look lasted only a second. Still, it unsettled her. By late afternoon, she finally escaped the growing crowds and carried a basket of supplies toward a small cabin on the edge of the forest. An elderly widower lived there alone. She visited him twice each week. The path wound through pine trees and wildflowers. For the first time all day, silence returned. Evelyn breathed easier. This was the life she preferred. Quiet roads. Small acts of kindness. No questions. No expectations. Halfway down the trail she stopped. Someone stood ahead. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dressed in black. Nathaniel Ashford appeared completely out of place among the forest flowers. He seemed equally surprised to find her there. For a moment neither spoke. Then Evelyn sighed softly. "Your Majesty." Nathaniel inclined his head. Evelyn Carter. Hearing her full name from the Alpha King felt strangely unsettling. I was not aware kings walked through forests alone. I was not aware bakers delivered supplies this far from the village. She almost smiled despite herself. Touché. Nathaniel's expression remained calm. You know who I am. Everyone knows who you are. Yet you are one of the few people who do not appear impressed. Evelyn adjusted the basket on her arm. Should I be? The question earned a faint reaction she could not quite identify. Not annoyance. Something closer to curiosity. Most people are. Most people have never watched you stand in the middle of a flower field. Nathaniel glanced around. A fair observation. Silence settled between them. Birds chirped somewhere overhead. Wind moved gently through the trees. The moment felt oddly normal despite how impossible it should have been. Nathaniel studied her carefully. Not in the way men sometimes looked at women. Not even the way rulers evaluated subjects. It felt more like he was trying to solve a puzzle. You avoid the training grounds, he said suddenly. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Many people do. Not wolves. The words landed softly but carried weight. Evelyn looked away toward the trees. Perhaps I am unusual. Perhaps. Nathaniel did not press further. Strangely, that made her more nervous. Most people accepted simple answers. Nathaniel seemed willing to wait for better ones. Eventually, she continued down the trail. The Alpha King matched her pace. "Are you following me?" she asked. "We are walking in the same direction." "Convenient." "Very." Another near smile threatened to appear. She refused to allow it. The elderly widower's cabin soon appeared through the trees. Nathaniel stopped. "You come here often?" "Twice a week." "Why?" Evelyn looked genuinely confused. "Because he needs help." Nathaniel followed her gaze toward the small cabin. Understanding flickered across his face. "And nobody asked you to do this." "No, you simply do it." "Somebody should." For several seconds, the Alpha King said nothing. Then he nodded once. Not as a king. Not as a ruler. As a man acknowledging something he respected. The realization unsettled Evelyn even more than his questions. When she turned toward the cabin, she could still feel his gaze following her. And for the first time in years, she found herself thinking about the stormy night she had buried her past beneath silver soil. Because something about Nathaniel Ashford made her fear that the life she had carefully hidden might not stay buried forever. The following week should have felt ordinary. Instead, Evelyn found herself noticing things she had successfully ignored for years. The way conversations stopped when royal guards entered a room. The way villagers seemed eager to impress visiting officials. The way Nathaniel Ashford somehow appeared wherever she least expected him. It began innocently enough. One morning she was carrying baskets of vegetables from the market when she spotted the Alpha King speaking with local merchants. The next afternoon she found him helping inspect repairs along a damaged bridge. 2 days later she nearly walked into him while delivering supplies to the schoolhouse. Each encounter was brief, polite, harmless. Yet together they created a pattern she could not ignore. Nathaniel never demanded her attention. He never summoned her. He never questioned her directly about her past. Somehow that made him even more difficult to understand. Most rulers preferred control. Nathaniel preferred observation. And Evelyn was beginning to suspect she had become the subject of that observation. The realization unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Late one afternoon, she escaped the village entirely and followed a narrow trail through the forest. Sunlight filtered between pine branches overhead. The familiar path wound northward through hills covered in wildflowers and silver grass. She had walked these woods countless times over the years. Here, at least, she could still think clearly. Or so she hoped. The farther she traveled, the quieter the world became. Birds called from distant trees. Wind moved gently through the leaves. For a while the silence soothed her. Then she noticed something strange. Fresh horse tracks marked the trail ahead. Not village horses. Larger. Better trained. Her stomach tightened. She followed the tracks for several hundred yards before reaching a ridge overlooking a broad valley. There, standing alone beside a black horse, was Nathaniel. He appeared completely absorbed by the landscape below. For several seconds, Evelyn considered turning around. Unfortunately, the horse noticed her first. Nathaniel turned. Their eyes met across the ridge. "You have a habit of appearing unexpectedly," Evelyn said as she approached. Nathaniel looked mildly amused. "I was about to say the same thing." She glanced toward the valley. "What are you doing here?" "Thinking." "That sounds dangerous." A faint smile touched his face. "Occasionally." Evelyn looked away before she could return the smile. The view stretched for miles. Forests rolled across distant hills. Rivers reflected the afternoon sun like silver ribbons. It was beautiful. Peaceful. The kind of place people visited when they wanted to escape noise. "You come here often?" Nathaniel asked. "Sometimes." "Why?" Evelyn considered the question. "Nobody asks me to be anything here." The answer slipped out before she could stop it. Silence followed. When she finally glanced toward him, she discovered he was studying her carefully. Not judging. Simply listening. "And people ask too much of you elsewhere?" he asked. Evelyn laughed softly. "Not anymore." The words carried more weight than she intended. Nathaniel noticed. Of course he noticed. "Anymore?" She immediately regretted answering. "It is not important." Most people would have accepted the dismissal. Nathaniel did not. Yet he surprised her by letting the silence remain. No pressure. No demands. Just patience. Somehow that felt worse. Minutes passed. Wind moved through the grass around them. Finally, Nathaniel spoke again. The northern elders mentioned something unusual. Evelyn's pulse quickened. About what? About you. Her expression remained calm through years of practice. Inside, however, every instinct became alert. People enjoy gossip. This was not gossip. Nathaniel rested one hand against the saddle of his horse. They said you never participate in wolf ceremonies. Evelyn stared toward the valley. Many people do not. They also said you avoid every training event. Silence. And every seasonal gathering. More silence. And every tradition involving pack bonds. Evelyn exhaled slowly. You have been investigating me. Observing. That sounds suspiciously similar. Nathaniel did not argue. The honesty somehow made everything worse. For several moments neither spoke. Then Evelyn asked the question she had avoided since his arrival. Why? The wind seemed to pause around them. Nathaniel's answer came quietly. Because you are the only person in this territory who acts like she is hiding from something that no longer exists. The words struck far closer than he could possibly know. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. Memories stirred beneath carefully constructed walls. Rain. Silver soil. A promise whispered into darkness. She looked away immediately. You are wrong. Nathaniel watched her for several seconds. Perhaps. Yet neither of them believed it. As the sun slowly lowered toward the horizon, Evelyn realized something deeply troubling. The Alpha King was getting closer to a truth she had spent 10 years burying. And for the first time since she was 14 years old, she found herself wondering whether some secrets wanted to be found. 3 nights later, the moon rose full and bright above the Northern Territory. Silver light spilled across rooftops, forests, and distant hills, turning the landscape into something that felt suspended between memory and dream. Evelyn stood beside her cottage window, staring toward the horizon. She had been trying to read for nearly an hour. The book remained open in her hands. She had not turned a single page. Nathaniel's words continued echoing through her thoughts. You act like you are hiding from something that no longer exists. She hated how accurate the observation felt. Most people looked at her and saw a quiet woman who baked bread, repaired fences, and helped neighbors. They saw kindness, reliability, simplicity. Nobody saw the constant effort required to maintain that life. Nobody saw the invisible walls she rebuilt every day. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. When she opened the door, Martha stood outside wrapped in a shawl. I thought you might still be awake, the older woman said. Evelyn smiled faintly and invited her inside. They shared tea beside the fireplace while crickets sang beyond the windows. Conversation drifted from village gossip to weather forecasts and harvest schedules. Then Martha suddenly asked, Have you visited it lately? Evelyn froze. The question needed no explanation. There was only one place Martha could mean. The older woman had never known the full story, but she knew enough. No, Evelyn answered quietly. Martha nodded. And yet you keep looking north. Silence settled between them. Flames crackled softly inside the hearth. Finally, Martha reached across the table and squeezed Evelyn's hand. Some things stay buried because they should, she said. Others stay buried because we are afraid to face them. After Martha left, Evelyn remained awake long after midnight. Eventually, she stepped outside. The night air felt cool against her skin. Above her, the moon shone brighter than she had seen in months. Without allowing herself time to reconsider, she started walking. The familiar path appeared beneath silver light. Forest trails twisted between ancient trees. Hills rolled gently beneath the stars. She told herself she only wanted fresh air. She told herself she was taking a walk. Deep down she knew she was lying. Nearly an hour later the trees opened. The field of silver grass stretched before her exactly as she remembered. Moonlight transformed every blade into liquid silver. Wind moved through the field in slow waves. The sight stole her breath. 10 years. 10 years since she had stood here. 10 years since she had whispered goodbye to the strongest part of herself. The field looked unchanged. She wished she could say the same. Slowly, Evelyn walked toward the center. Her heart beat harder with every step. The patch of earth was still there, hidden among thousands of identical places. Yet she found it immediately. Some memories never faded. She knelt beside the spot. The soil looked ordinary, quiet, undisturbed. Her fingers hovered inches above the ground. Then she stopped herself. No, she had not come here for that. She had come to remember. Nothing more. A sudden sound made her turn. Footsteps. Not close. Not threatening. Just close enough. Evelyn rose immediately. A tall figure emerged from the edge of the field. Her stomach dropped. Nathaniel Ashford. Of course it was Nathaniel Ashford. For a second neither spoke. Moonlight illuminated both of them. The Alpha King glanced around the field before returning his gaze to her face. "I had a feeling I would find you here," he said. Evelyn folded her arms. Do kings usually spend their evenings following women through forests? Only the mysterious ones. Despite herself, she almost laughed. Almost. Nathaniel stepped closer, his expression calm. "What is this place?" The question landed heavily between them. Evelyn looked away. Wind swept across the silver grass. "A place I used to visit." Nathaniel studied her for several moments. "That is not what I asked." She closed her eyes briefly. Every instinct urged her to leave, to deflect, to hide. Yet something about the field made dishonesty feel impossible. "This place matters," she admitted. "Why?" The moonlight seemed brighter, the silence deeper. Evelyn stared at the ground where an old promise slept beneath layers of soil. "Because," she said softly, "this is where I buried something I never wanted to see again." Nathaniel followed her gaze. For the first time since they met, genuine surprise crossed his face. Neither of them realized that beneath the earth, hidden beneath 10 years of silence and silver roots, something ancient had begun to wake. For several seconds neither moved. The moon hung high above the field, bathing the silver grass in pale light while the wind whispered through the valley. Nathaniel's gaze remained fixed on the patch of ground Evelyn had been staring at moments earlier. He did not ask another question immediately. That surprised her. Most people would have rushed to fill the silence. Nathaniel simply waited. The patience unsettled her more than curiosity ever could. Evelyn folded her arms tightly. "You should go back to the village." Nathaniel glanced toward her. Because this does not concern you." "I think we both know that is not true." The answer arrived calmly, without accusation. Evelyn looked away. 10 years ago, she had believed burying those fangs would end the story. Instead, it seemed the story had simply been waiting. A cloud drifted across the moon. Shadows moved over the field. Nathaniel stepped closer to the patch of earth. Not close enough to touch it. Just close enough to study it. "You buried something important here." It was not a question. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. "Yes, a keepsake." She shook her head. "No, a memory?" "In a way." Nathaniel crouched near the ground. His expression remained thoughtful. "You speak about it as if it is still alive." The word struck unexpectedly hard. Because part of her had always feared that was true. She remembered every detail of that stormy night. Every handful of dirt. Every tear she had refused to acknowledge. Every promise whispered into the rain. Time had passed, but the memory had never faded. Nathaniel brushed his fingers lightly through the silver grass. "Whatever is buried here still matters to you." Evelyn wanted to deny it. Instead, she found herself saying, "If it did not matter, I would not have come back." The admission lingered between them. Nathaniel nodded once. Not victorious. Simply understanding. The wind shifted again. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called through the darkness. Evelyn stared across the field and felt suddenly exhausted. 10 years was a long time to carry the same secret. "I thought if I left it here, everything would change," she said quietly. Nathaniel remained silent, allowing her to continue. "I thought I could become someone else." She laughed softly. There was no humor in the sound. "I spent years trying." The Alpha King rose slowly to his feet. "Did it work?" Evelyn looked down at the earth. "Some days." The answer felt honest. more honest than anything she had said in years. Nathaniel studied her face. And the other days? She hesitated. Then she admitted the truth. The other days I remembered. Moonlight returned as the clouds drifted away. Silver light washed across the field once more. Nathaniel followed her gaze toward the patch of ground. Something thoughtful settled behind his silver eyes. You come here often? Evelyn shook her head. No, then why tonight? The question lingered. She did not know how to answer, because she herself did not fully understand. Perhaps it was the king's arrival. Perhaps it was Martha's words. Perhaps it was simple exhaustion after years of pretending the past no longer existed. I think I wanted proof, she finally said. Proof of what? That it was still buried. Nathaniel's expression changed slightly. Not judgment. Not pity. Something closer to concern. And is it? Evelyn looked at the earth again. I do not know anymore. Silence returned. Yet this silence felt different. Less defensive. Less lonely. For the first time, someone else stood beside the weight she had carried alone. Neither noticed the faint glow beneath the grass at first. It was small. Barely visible. A soft silver shimmer hidden beneath the roots. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Did you see that? Evelyn froze. See what? Another pulse appeared. Quick. Faint. Then gone. Both stared at the ground. The field became perfectly still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Nathaniel slowly lowered one knee toward the earth. Something is down there. Panic immediately surged through Evelyn. Do not. The sharpness in her voice surprised both of them. Nathaniel looked up. Evelyn, please. The single word emerged softer this time. More vulnerable. More honest. For a moment the Alpha King simply watched her. Then his gaze shifted back toward the soil. The faint silver shimmer appeared again, stronger than before. Neither spoke. Deep beneath the roots and earth, hidden for a decade beneath sacred silver soil, something had awakened. And as Evelyn stared at the ground where she had buried part of herself so many years ago, she realized with growing dread that the secret she had spent 10 years protecting might no longer be willing to stay hidden. The silver glow beneath the soil appeared again. Stronger this time. No longer a trick of moonlight. No longer something either of them could dismiss. Evelyn stared at the faint light pulsing beneath the roots of the silver grass and felt 10 years of carefully buried memories rising toward the surface. Nathaniel remained kneeling beside the patch of earth. He did not touch it. He did not reach for it. Yet she could see the questions forming behind his silver eyes. This time there was no escape. The field itself seemed unwilling to keep her secret any longer. The wind moved softly across the valley. Somewhere in the distance water flowed over stone. Everything else felt impossibly still. Nathaniel finally looked up. Tell me. The words were quiet. Not a command from a king. A request from a man who wanted the truth. Evelyn closed her eyes. For several seconds she listened to the night around them. She remembered being 14 years old. She remembered the storm. The rain. The fear. The loneliness. Most of all, she remembered the shame. When she opened her eyes again, the moonlight seemed brighter than before. I was not always like this, she said softly. Nathaniel said nothing. People think I avoid pack traditions because I dislike them. She laughed once. The sound carried no humor. That is not true. Her gaze drifted toward the glowing earth. When I was younger, I loved everything about being a wolf. Memories unfolded slowly. I trained constantly. I competed in every gathering. I believed strength solved problems. Her fingers tightened around her sleeves. I believed if I became strong enough, nobody around me would ever suffer. Nathaniel listened without interruption. The patience made it easier somehow. Harder too. Evelyn swallowed. Then life happened. She stared at the silver grass moving beneath the wind. People place enormous value on strength. They celebrate it, admire it, depend on it. Her voice softened. But nobody talks about what happens when strength fails. The words hung between them. Nathaniel's expression grew more serious. Something happened 10 years ago. It was not a question. Evelyn nodded. Yes. The answer felt impossibly heavy. A terrible winter struck the Northern Territory. Food disappeared. Supplies vanished. Everyone struggled. She paused. I thought I could fix everything. The old ache returned immediately. Time had never truly healed it. It had only grown quieter. I made choices I believed were right. Her eyes filled with emotion she rarely allowed herself to feel. And people paid the price for them. Nathaniel remained completely still. Not judging. Not interrupting. Simply listening. Nobody blamed me directly, Evelyn continued. That almost made it worse. She looked down at her hands. Every time someone thanked me for trying, I felt smaller. The silver glow beneath the soil brightened faintly. Eventually, I stopped trusting myself. Silence followed. The confession felt raw. Exposed. Honest in a way she had not been for years. So you buried the fangs. Nathaniel's voice remained gentle. Evelyn nodded. I buried everything they represented. Her eyes drifted toward the earth. Strength. Pride. Confidence. She took a slow breath. The person I used to be. For several moments neither spoke. The moon hung high above them. Silver light washed across the field like flowing water. Nathaniel finally looked toward the glowing patch of soil. And did it work? The question pierced deeper than he realized. Evelyn considered it carefully. 10 years of hiding. 10 years of quiet routines. 10 years of making herself smaller. Safer. Invisible. I survived, she answered. Nathaniel's gaze returned to her face. That was not my question. The words struck with startling clarity. Evelyn felt something inside her shift. Small. Painful. True. Surviving was not the same thing as living. Martha had said the same thing days earlier. Somehow hearing it again made it impossible to ignore. The glow beneath the earth pulsed once more. Brighter than ever. Nathaniel slowly rose to his feet. His eyes never left hers. You buried more than fangs here. Evelyn felt tears threatening again. I know. The Alpha King took a step closer. And I think part of you has been waiting for someone to notice. The honesty of the statement stole her breath. Because deep down she feared he was right. The silver light beneath the ground suddenly expanded, illuminating the roots beneath the grass like veins of moonlight stretching through the earth. Both of them turned toward the glow. The secret was no longer sleeping. And for the first time in 10 years, Evelyn realized the past was not coming back to punish her. It was coming back because it refused to let her disappear. The silver light continued spreading beneath the roots of the field, weaving through the soil like threads of moonlight awakening after a long sleep. Evelyn stood frozen beside Nathaniel, unable to look away. For 10 years she had believed the past was buried. For 10 years she had treated those memories like something dangerous, something that needed to remain hidden beneath earth and silence. Yet now the ground itself seemed determined to challenge that belief. The glow pulsed again. Brighter. Steadier. Nathaniel watched the phenomenon carefully before turning toward her. This is not normal. Evelyn laughed softly. That may be the safest statement anyone has made tonight. Despite the tension, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It vanished quickly, replaced by concern. Has this ever happened before? She shook her head immediately. Never. The answer was honest. During the rare occasions she had returned to this place over the years, the field had always remained silent. Quiet. Empty. Tonight felt different. Alive. Wind swept across the valley. Thousands of silver blades bent together, creating waves that rolled toward the horizon. The entire field seemed connected somehow. Nathaniel slowly stepped back from the glowing patch. Then something changed. Evelyn already knew he was right. The question was what? She lowered her gaze toward the illuminated earth. Memories rose uninvited. The frightened 14-year-old girl kneeling in a storm. The handwritten vow. The promise to never trust herself again. She had spent years believing that promise protected people. Now she wondered if it had only protected her from disappointment. Nathaniel's voice interrupted her thoughts. Look at me. The request was simple. Yet it carried unexpected weight. Evelyn hesitated before meeting his eyes. Silver moonlight reflected within them. Calm. Steady. Certain. You have spent 10 years blaming yourself. She immediately looked away again. You do not know that. You told me enough. His tone remained gentle. Every story you shared tonight had the same ending. Evelyn crossed her arms. And what ending was that? Nathaniel took a step closer. You decided every mistake meant you could never trust yourself again. The words struck harder than she expected, because deep down she knew they were true. She opened her mouth to argue. Nothing came out. Nathaniel continued. You speak as though strength betrayed you. Silence. But from what I have heard, strength was never the problem. Evelyn felt emotion tightening inside her chest. Then what was? Nathaniel looked toward the glowing earth. You expected yourself to be perfect. The answer arrived so simply that it stole her breath. For several moments she could only stare at him. No elder had ever said that. No friend. Not even Martha. Everyone had focused on the choices she made. The mistakes. The consequences. Nathaniel was the first person who seemed to see the impossible standard she had spent years holding herself against. The realization frightened her, because it felt dangerously close to hope. The silver glow suddenly brightened again. This time neither ignored it. Light spread outwards several feet through the soil. Ancient symbols began appearing briefly beneath the grass before fading again. Nathaniel's expression sharpened. Those markings. Evelyn followed his gaze. Strange patterns shimmered beneath the roots. Curved lines. Crescent shapes. Symbols she somehow recognized despite never seeing them before. A strange warmth spread through her chest. Not fear. Recognition. The sensation felt impossible. I know them, she whispered. Nathaniel looked at her. How? I do not know. The answer sounded absurd even to her. Yet it was true. Somehow the symbols felt familiar. Like forgotten words remembered at the edge of a dream. The field responded again. Light traveled farther this time. Across dozens of yards. Then hundreds. The entire valley began glowing beneath the moon. Evelyn stared in disbelief. What is happening? Nathaniel remained focused on the expanding light. I think the field is responding to you. Her heart immediately began racing. Why? Before he could answer, a sudden gust swept through the valley. Silver grass bent low. Moonlight intensified. Then, for a single brief moment, the earth beneath the glowing patch became transparent. Evelyn saw them. Two silver fangs resting beneath the soil exactly where she had left them. Beside them lay the folded paper she had buried 10 years earlier. Somehow untouched by time. Untouched by decay. Nathaniel saw them too. Neither spoke. The sight carried too much meaning. Too much history. Slowly, the vision faded. The earth became solid again. The field returned to stillness. Yet something fundamental had changed. Nathaniel turned toward her. His expression was no longer curious. No longer investigative. It was certain. You buried the wrong thing, Evelyn. The words landed with startling force. She stared at him. What does that mean? Moonlight illuminated the valley around them. Nathaniel's silver eyes never left hers. You buried your faith in yourself. And for the first time in 10 years, Evelyn could not find a single reason to disagree. For a long moment neither spoke. The valley remained bathed in silver moonlight while the glowing fields stretched endlessly around them. Nathaniel's words echoed through Evelyn's mind with unsettling clarity. You buried your faith in yourself. She stared at the patch of earth where her past slept beneath the roots and soil. 10 years ago, she had believed she was making a sacrifice. A necessary choice. A responsible choice. Yet, standing here now, she could not ignore the possibility that she had mistaken fear for wisdom. The realization was terrifying. The glow beneath the ground pulsed once more. Stronger than before. Silver light spread across the field in rippling waves. Thousands of blades of grass shimmered simultaneously, transforming the valley into a sea of living starlight. Evelyn took an involuntary step backward. Nathaniel. The Alpha King was already watching the phenomenon carefully. His expression remained calm, but she could see the tension in his posture. Whatever was happening, it had moved far beyond coincidence. The silver symbols appeared again beneath the earth. This time they did not fade immediately. Ancient patterns spread outward from the buried fangs like roots of light. Curved lines intertwined with crescent shapes. The entire field seemed connected to the place she had chosen 10 years earlier. A strange warmth gathered beneath Evelyn's ribs. Familiar. Powerful. Not dangerous. The sensation felt like recognizing a forgotten part of herself. Her heartbeat quickened. The warmth spread through her chest, down her arms, and into her fingertips. She closed her eyes briefly. Memories surfaced without resistance. Running beneath moonlit skies as a young girl. Laughing during training competitions. Feeling strong without feeling afraid. Feeling capable without feeling guilty. For years she had locked those memories away because they hurt too much. Now they returned carrying something unexpected. Not pain. Longing. Nathaniel's voice interrupted the moment. Do you feel that? Evelyn opened her eyes. Yes. The answer came almost as a whisper. I have not felt this in years. The Alpha King nodded slowly. Then perhaps it never left. Wind swept across the valley again. The silver grass bowed low before rising once more. The field seemed alive. Listening. Waiting. Evelyn looked toward the buried patch of earth. The fear she had carried for a decade suddenly felt smaller. Not gone, but smaller. She realized something surprising. The girl who buried those fangs had been terrified. Terrified of making another mistake. Terrified of hurting people. Terrified of trusting herself. That frightened girl had believed disappearing was the safest choice. Yet 10 years later, standing beneath the moon beside the one person who had refused to let her remain invisible, Evelyn finally saw the truth. She had not become safer. She had simply become smaller. Tears filled her eyes again. This time she did not hide them. Nathaniel noticed, but said nothing. The silence felt respectful. Understanding. The kind of silence that allowed difficult truths to breathe. Then something extraordinary happened. The earth beneath the glowing patch shifted slightly. Not breaking. Not opening. Simply responding. Silver light burst upward through the roots and illuminated the soil from within. For a brief moment the two buried fangs became visible once more beneath the earth. They no longer looked abandoned. They looked preserved. Waiting. Beside them rested the folded vow she had written as a teenager. The paper glowed softly beneath the moonlight. Evelyn stared at it. The promise that had guided her life for 10 years suddenly felt distant. Like words written by someone she loved but no longer fully recognized. Nathaniel stepped beside her. You do not have to be that frightened girl forever. The sentence landed gently. Yet it shattered something inside her. Not in a painful way. In a freeing way. The invisible chains she had wrapped around herself for years suddenly felt fragile. Human. Temporary. Evelyn looked toward him. Silver light reflected in both their eyes. What if I fail again? The question emerged before she could stop it. Nathaniel answered immediately. Then you will do what everyone else does. She frowned. And what is that? A faint smile appeared. Learn. Continue. Try again. The simplicity of the answer nearly made her laugh through her tears. 10 years of fear. 10 years of hiding. 10 years spent believing mistakes should define her forever. And this man stood beside her acting as though growth was the most natural thing in the world. Perhaps it was. The silver light gradually softened. The field grew quiet once more. Yet something fundamental had changed. The valley no longer felt like a graveyard. It felt like a beginning. Evelyn took a slow breath and looked across the sea of silver grass. For the first time in 10 years, she did not feel ashamed of the person she used to be. And somewhere beneath the sacred soil, the buried fangs gleamed beneath the moonlight as if recognizing that the woman who had hidden them was finally ready to stop hiding herself.